Hello and very welcome to Wittgenstein and Psychology, a paper by Daniel D. Hutto. I jumped a bit here from the article we are currently reading in this exchange to this one. So we'll get back to Ohad and Andreas Blank later on. I'd say this text has great pertinence in the connection with Joachim Fioroni and, of course, Deal. There's also in a big debate now the view that, at least partly the view that Daniel D. Hutto is representing by Paul Horridge has been under some debate by a professor in England, which makes it even more interesting. His name is Timothy Williamson. It will be interesting to be in on a debate here. At Oxford, of course. Where else? Professor of Logic. We'll contact him later. Williams talks without breathing as one of his characteristics. Williamson. But he's very sharp. Wittgenstein and Psychology by Daniel D. Hutto, and this is Wittgenstein 1727. To understand liberating our minds. To understand Wittgenstein's stance on psychology, it is necessary to understand his broader approach to philosophy. Philosophy, according to Wittgenstein, is a sort of rescue operation. Its main task is to bring words back from their metaphysical to their ordinary use. The recovery process of which he speaks is anything but easy. It requires us to break free, often over and over again, from certain compelling but distorting pictures or ways of thinking about various subject matters. Ways of thinking that irresistibly attract us and bewitch our intelligence. pictures wreak havoc if, when we theorize about the mind, we take them at face value. Their grip on the imagination is not the grip of a tremendous hypothesis like the Big Bang, but more like the grip of an entrancing metaphor or myth. And their influence on theory is as permanent as the language in which they are lodged. One of the most pernicious and perverse effects of pictures, as Wittgenstein observed, is that when we have got a picture of our ordinary way of speaking, we are tempted to say that our way of speaking does not describe the facts as they really are. Speaking of his own battles with pictures, Wittgenstein tells us of distorting effects of view he once propounded in the Tractatus Logico Philosophicus, that we see that what we call sentence and language have not the formal unity I imagine, but is a family of structures more or less related to one another. Painstaking philosophical work is needed to liberate us from picture-driven tendencies, and such work is primarily a matter of working on oneself in a prolonged and potentially never-ending process. The ultimate source of our philosophical troubles is that certain pictures take hold of us and fosters unshakable convictions about how we must conceive of various subject matters. In diagnosing his own problem, Wittgenstein tells us that a picture held us captive, and we could not get outside of it, for it lay in our language, and language seemed to repeat it to us inexorably. The power of such pictures is so complete that the ways of thinking they promote are not taken to be merely one possible way of thinking about the topic in question, but as the only possible way of doing so. The standard pattern is that one misunderstands the role of an ideal. It produces a superstitious conviction that holds in place a picture of how things must be, despite contradiction and anomaly. Importantly, as Meredith Williams highlights, the superstition or picture that holds the philosophy captive is not itself a mistake. That is to say, pictures are not coherent, but empirically false theories. Rather at root, to be in the grip of a picture is to be attracted to certain distorting analogies. Which, when coupled with certain other explanatory ambitions, fosters confusion and drives misguided attempts to explain and theorize. Breaking free of pictures and the picture-driven theorizing they inspired requires recognizing that the picture is not a source of special insight into a subject matter, but is in fact a wholly empty, constraining and distracting imposition on our thinking. Hence, what is needed in dealing with pictures is therapy rather than a better theory. In an attempt to explicate the therapeutic effects of Wittgenstein's philosophy, Horwich identifies 8 stages in the process through which philosophical problems arise and how they are eventually resolved. Using Horwich labels, these are 1. Scientism, assuming that the simple a priori principles await discovery. Analogy, comparing a target phenomenon with some other phenomenon that it resembles in key respects, e.g., that is, numbers are like ordinary material objects. Generalization, supposing that the target phenomenon and the compared phenomenon in fact share essential properties, that is, both numbers and material objects belong in the general class of objects. Four, idiosyncrasy, acknowledging that the target phenomenon has special features that distinguish it from the compared phenomenon. For instance, numbers are abstract and thus unlike ordinary material objects. 5. Paradox, recognition of fundamental tensions that arise from trying to combine stages 3 and 4. For instance, it would be hard to make sense of how numbers could be objects at all if they are truly abstract. 6. Bewilderment, puzzlement about how the target phenomenon is even possible. That is, how can numbers exist at all if they are abstract? Theories. Various elaborate attempts are made to provide explanations to resolve and relieve the paradoxical tension. That is, numbers are fictions, they are Platonic entities, etc. Eight, therapy. Ultimately, the tension is dissolved, not by explaining how to make sense of the special features of the target phenomena, but by recognizing that any philosophical puzzles generated about it are in fact entirely puzzles of our own manufacture. In other words, we must come to see that the puzzles are in question are only the product of unhealthy combination of our attraction for misleading analogies, our craving for simple generalities, and our tendency to seek explanations. As Wittgenstein's later writings and scattered posthumous remarks on the philosophy of psychology continually demonstrate, we are nowhere more susceptible to such metaphysical siren songs of picture-driven theorizing than when it comes to thinking about the nature of minds. Two, descriptive philosophy of psychology. According to Wittgenstein, to understand a given subject matter, psychology included, is a matter of supplying illuminating descriptions, not penetrating explanations. Famously, he tells us, philosophy simply puts everything before us and neither explains nor deduces anything. Since everything lies open to view, there's nothing to explain. For what is hidden, for example, is of no interest to us. Elsewhere, he writes, we may not advance any kind of theory. There must not be anything hypothetical in our considerations. We must do away with all explanation, and description alone must take its place. In the line with his descriptive agenda, everywhere in Wittgenstein's philosophy of psychology, the emphasis is on the primacy of action, forms of life, shared practices, and customary ways of going on. Wittgenstein turned his back on the idea that philosophy requires getting at the essence of things through an analysis of what is hidden. Instead, he directed us to attend to what lies before our eyes, holding that our focus should be on the fact that we act in such and such ways, that is, punish certain actions, establish the state of affairs thus, and so give orders, render accounts, describe colors, take an interest in others' feelings. What has to be accepted, the given, it might be said, are facts of living, forms of life. In this vein, he offers us his famous equation: to imagine a language means to imagine a form of life. A few aphorisms later, when drawing attention to the fact that there are countless possible uses of language, he again emphasizes that the term language game is meant to bring into prominence the fact that speaking of language is part of an activity or a form of life. Focusing exclusively on these passages that talk of language games can give the impression that Wittgenstein is only interested in our linguistic behavior. Yet, although in our case, focusing on how we use language is important, Wittgenstein's understanding of our form of life is not restricted to what we do with words, since what we do with words is inherently tied up to our non-linguistic natural reactions. A recurrent theme in Wittgenstein's later writings is his continually emphasis on the foundational role that partaking in a form of life plays in making our sophisticated language games possible. Thus, it is what human beings say that is true and false, and they agree in the language they use. That is not agreement in opinions, but in a form of life. In many places, he speaks of instinctive and natural responses. Natural ways of doing things and of carrying on that are at the basis of all that we do. For Wittgenstein, our natural responses and reactions to things underwrite even our most abstract and symbolic cognitive activity. Thus, I go through the proof and then accept its result. I mean, this is simply what we do. This is use and custom among us, or a fact of our natural history. In the final analysis, Wittgenstein holds that even in the domain of mathematics, we act without reasons. At the roots of thinking, at the bottom of our most sophisticated practices, including our following of linguistic and other roots, is doing. Doing and knowing what to do is not to be explained by hypothesizing extraordinary mental processes or operations. Subpersonal mental processes that somehow have commerce with and manage to interpret rules and meanings in ways that we as persons cannot. Wittgenstein's talk of our form of life encompasses both our more basic, non-linguistic animal ways of being, as well as our culturally and linguistically scaffolded ways of being. These different ways of being relate to one another in a nested way. The first makes the second possible. So it's entanglement once more. Our natural animal responses fund and fuel, but do not circumscribe the possibilities for our more sophisticated cultural and communal customs and practices. For Wittgenstein, it is not possible to understand our form of life by getting at what is beneath or behind it. There is no possibility of explaining its basis in order to answer certain perceived philosophical needs. Philosophers, Wittgenstein holds, must surrender any hope of explaining our form of life, of giving an account of what underlies it and makes it possible. Consequently, for him, it is fruitless to try to explain cognitive activity in terms of our representing features of a mind-independent reality, after the fashion of intellectualist theories of mind and language. In gesturing at what lies at the bottom of our sense-making practices. Wittgenstein was clearly not trying to use them to make philosophical pronouncements about what there is or what there must be. Both remain outside the scope of the explicable, sayable, or articulable, and under no circumstances could their a priori limits they embody be positively stated or charted. They cannot be drawn. An explanation will hinder everything. We cannot survey the limits of what is possible for us to say or do once and for all in advance. Our form of life can be explored from within, but its limits cannot be grasped and described a priori. Just gonna finish the last stuff here. Go down, take the last sentence there. Wittgenstein's signature notions of language games and forms of life are meant to bring into prominence that there is no way to understand our psychology from a theoretical or outsider perspective. There's no getting behind, beneath, or above our form of life for the philosophical purpose of providing, and listen now, providing a more illuminating explanation or justification of it. Philosophers go wrong in attempting to theorize about and explain what lies at the base of all our activities. In place of these misguided attempts, the best we can do is to be vigilant of transgressions of sense, occasion by occasion, without the aid of general rules that can be independently confirmed. And there we put a point. It's just perfect there. Stay on there for a second. And I will make a mark. Go down just a little bit, please. Here, there. There is an important point. I would start from the reverse with just this one. There is no way of understanding our psychology from a theoretical or outside perspective. And there you have, in a nutshell, Lee Smolin, Roberto Unger, Jacques Derrida, and Heidegger in one, but very condensed. There's no getting behind, beneath, or above our former life for the philosophical purpose of providing a more illuminating explanation or justification of it. And there one can understand even more why Jordan Peterson liked Joachim so much. He doesn't systemize. What he does is to describe alpha and omega, not to explain it away. He doesn't do the mistake, cosmological fallacy if you want, or that megalomaniacal idea that humans can understand all from a point of nowhere, that is, and listen now, without any observer, leaving himself. We can go back, and I'm going to make some outtakes. Page, second page. This is Horwich, or Horwich. This is the professor that is so highly debated by Williamson. Lecture I can recommend. And here are all the, so to say, mistakes one can fall into. Scientism, which is so incredibly tempting. And that is most definitely the way of most people today. And I'll say the very majority of scientists also fall into this. This is exactly what Paul Feyerabend meant by universalize away knowledge or information. Seems to be a process of advancement, but it is nothing of the kind. It's a mistake to universalize in order to get everything in a small box. Analogy is even easier to fall for. It's comparing target phenomenon with some other phenomenon. We mentioned one earlier on here, the Saussurean and also Levi-Straussian signified. In Levi-Strauss, what the true value of a tribesman or something similar in reality, and are grateful. Generalization, supposing that the target phenomenon and the compared phenomenon in fact share essential properties. Very easily done. Idiosyncrasy, that something is special and disliked from something. Five, paradox, and how we combine the two things, or what mostly happens is we go from one to the other. Attacking the Platonic abstractions, we end up in some sort of horrid materialism, and then we go back to Platonism. If this could be understood now. Those are the features, and they are most similar to the 7 heads of the monster. It has exactly 7 heads, and this resolution is 8. It's called therapy. That's the way out of that lockdown. The next page, 3. The little quote there, it's very pointing. Go down and come to a quote by Wittgenstein from Philosophical Investigation. Further down, it's separate. There you have it, at the very bottom there. We do things, and I'm gonna read the whole thing. Punish certain actions, establish the state of affairs thus and thus, give orders, render accounts, describe colors, take an interest in others' feelings, and thousands and millions of more things. These are the facts of living forms of life. This is what reality is. This is how reality is still for an Indian of, for instance, the Navajo tribe. The doings. We sort of get stuck with the static remnants, the ashes of reality, or what is left when we lose what is true and real to us, what is the alpha and the omega, the global take. We are stuck in the local, the diachronic, if you like, but both in time and space relation. And of course, we have the famous, to imagine a language, it means to imagine a form of life. And if a lion were to speak, we would not be able to understand her. She would not be understood. Her life world is so different. And according to an analytical philosopher, or Bernard or François Jacob would know, there's only one world, and we who inhabit that world are just guests. We have nothing to do with that world. We are inactive, passive, neutral ingredients. We passively experience, and all our acts, all the gazillion things mentioned by Wittgenstein here, are made impossible or unnecessary. These are the facts of living. This is movement, but it's also stillness, oddly enough. Whereas in staticness, in a way, you don't even have stillness. Last sentence of the next page. Yes, it is. I see your comment there. It's dense. It's condensated of what Horridge says. You can do recommend Horridge's book if you can find it, would be great. We cannot survey the limit of what is possible for us to say or do once and for all in advance. You see, this is a temporal cosmological fallacy. We are not only outside of space to look at the universe or look at time and such things, but here it's also temporal outsidedness. So we say beforehand we can know what's going to play out. Determinism. So oddly enough, Wittgenstein says that we create determinism, or even could be it's a figment of our imagination. Could be. But we will not reify that also. He's pointing to the synchronic time. And let me just repeat the last one for good manners. There's no getting behind, beneath, or above our form of life for the philosophical purpose of providing a more illuminating explanation or justification of it. Kalle, you're more than welcome to join.
Thank you. Let me go to the third hour on page 2. Plato had a great belief in the power of pictures, and we have the Platonic world of ideas, and he didn't like language, because language is something that messes it up.
Yeah, very good.
Wittgenstein instead, he focuses on language. And these are very strong words. Pictures are not coherent, but empirical false theories. That is, I think this is applies also is against Plato. And here we have to sort of say free of pictures. On the one hand, I like this, on the other hand, I don't like it. We could think about this as a superposition, like the rabbit and a hare image. In a way, it's in the Platonic world, perhaps, in a superposition. But when you look at it, you decide which of the two animals it is, or you perhaps say it's both. So one are need images, but still images also need language, as in the case with the word trapeza that we discussed in the previous Wittgenstein lecture. So in Plato's world, what would be the ideal table be? Would it have three legs or 4 legs? Etymologically speaking, a trapeza should have 3 legs, but at Plato's time, tables usually had 4 legs. So what would Plato's ideal table be? So you what you probably the intake language in English is an intake word.
Yes, it's entangled with everything, and the picture is sort of befalls us, but is also hidden in a way. So we find out slowly by getting these hints of how language works, descriptions of the working of language. And in the end, both language and pictures and images would be healthy.
And using the table image. So let me imagine my perfect table. It would probably have 4 legs, but I would put the 4th leg with the parentheses. And then in superposition, you decide whether it has the both leg.
Oh yeah, yeah. Why not? I think that's
And
an
the part of
explanation as
this,
good as anyone.
and the part of this symbolizes language in a way. So we
Yeah,
have,
yeah, yeah.
hmm.
That's fine by me, Kalle.
And let me see. Thank you. So Horwich. So do we agree with Horwich, or do Daniel Hutto in this paper agree with Horwich? So if I understand Horwich correctly, he's attacking Plato because Plato assumes everything is already discovered. Everything is already discovered. We have to only find them out.
Yes, yes, yes. And
So,
also our modern scientists today, they mean that scientism, it's a good word. We just need the right theory, like Hawking, you know, that British physicist who had a theory of everything, and then you understand everything. But the thing is, you don't understand anything. You block understanding.
I do like these labels. They're useful.
Yes.
So I do like that Horwich. He's very pedagogic, if you could say it.
Definitely. It's well worth saving because
Mm,
it's not to be used as an argument only. It's more, what do I do myself? Because I can relate to each one. Definitely, I was in that position, and a couple of these positions I'm still in. So it makes it even more interesting. It's easy to relate to them.
Absolutely.
Taking Plato could lead to too much of reality or the opposite.
But on the other hand, we both are against this idea that everything is already waiting to be discovered. But who knows? Perhaps Plato had a point. Who knows? For instance, the great philosopher Dr. Folkman Smith, he's a Platonist. But I don't know if he thinks that everything is already discovered. You have to only find them out, so to say. Or they are already waiting for us to be discovered.
Well, we shouldn't forget that also Julian Barber called himself a Platonist, but in a very different way.
It's a tricky thing.
That I think maybe different aspects of Platonism they bring out, but maybe not the idea that we can never reach reality or something like that. I think we better end there. I think that was enough
Yes.
for you today. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much for participating, Kalle Lundahl.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening in. Have a very nice day, morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are. Do take care. Bye bye for now.
Thank you.
I end the recording.